But in terms of adoption, that mom can really take control in the most beautiful way because she gets to choose the parents who will raise her child. Mm-hmm. She gets to even, you can choose the city. If you want the baby to be close to you and watch her grow up or him grow up, you can pick someone close by. If you'd rather not be that involved, you can pick someone across the country, right? There's a lot of control you have. The CEO at Save the Storks, and we are here with EmpowerU talking about adoptions today. And if you've been able to watch our first 2 episodes, Emily and I have just been having some great conversations about adoption, and we've been speaking a lot about our perspectives or the perspectives of our adoptive parents. And we want to really just dig in and talk more about the birth mom. Emily brought up something in our last episode about we need to care about the mental health of that birth mom.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like mental health, especially these days, is such a huge topic. And with the birth mom, I mean, her hormones are all over the place just with the pregnancy and then having delivered the baby. And on top of that, I can't even imagine parting ways with your baby and just taking care of the mom first and making sure that she's okay and she doesn't have any postpartum issues and things like that. And just making sure that she feels loved and cared for, I think is huge, because I think that's something that the life-affirming movement often gets criticized for, is that we only care about the baby and it's all about the baby. But that's just not true, because you do want to care for the mom and the women and also obviously the baby, but the moms are so important as well.
Yeah, what you mentioned is so true, because in the pro-life movement, if you will, the focus has been on the baby, right? I know when I grew up in the 80s in Orange County, there was a Planned Parenthood and there were protesters outside this Planned Parenthood, and they had huge signs of fetuses and they were shouting in these big megaphones. And I would always say, like, they're scaring women into the abortion clinic. Yeah. They are not loving her like Jesus would love her. Mm-hmm. And right now in our culture, it is totally normal and acceptable to have an abortion, right? If you go on Instagram or TikTok, I mean, there's so many celebrities. There was this whole campaign called Shout Your Abortion. Miley Cyrus had tens of millions of views. I think the Kardashians have been paid like $200,000 per post by Planned Parenthood to talk about abortion. There's just been so much in our society with singers and actors and politicians who are talking about abortion as women's health care. And it's so sad because that woman, or, the teenage girl who finds herself in a pregnancy, she's been hearing probably since she was a little girl that abortion's normal and it's nothing to worry about. It's health care. Now we have the abortion pill. Just take the pill. You'll have a heavy period. Those are lies. We know women who have taken the abortion pill and they delivered a little baby, right? They're traumatized by that. We want to really pray about, and with you as the church, anyone who's watching out there, if you know any young women in your life, pray about how you can come alongside her when she does come to you in confidence and say, I think I'm pregnant. How are you going to react? How are you going to embrace her? Are you going to judge her? Are you going to say, what were you doing? What were you thinking? Are you the type of person who's going to say you're going to bring shame on this family? I hope not. We have a START course. If you go to startcourse.org, you can check that out, go through some of the videos. It will help coach you on how to speak to that woman. But we're not really here to talk about that today. We're really here to talk about that young woman and how we as the church can come alongside her and let her know that we love you. We love your baby, but what do you need, Mom? What do you need? And we have some new initiatives at Save the Storks that are really coming around moms in a major way to make sure she has 8 pillars of care. Again, we can talk about that in another video, but if you are a young mom, please, check out the comments. We'll put the link in there so you can learn more about some options if you feel like you don't have any in your community. But Emily, for that birth mom who finds out she's pregnant, and like you said, the hormones and maybe she has a boyfriend that she doesn't even know that well, or he's not good to her. Maybe she lives in a super religious home, or maybe she lives in a home where she didn't really have great parents and she doesn't have the support. Maybe she doesn't have a job. She doesn't feel like she has the education. That's why right now I think women feel like 3,000 times a day they're going to an abortion clinic or taking the pills in their home, and 3,000 babies a day are being aborted. Why do you think women aren't looking at the adoption route?
I think that adoption just isn't talked about. I mean, we all know it exist, especially since we're working in this world. But I think that, yeah, abortion has just saturated the marketplace so much that that's immediately where they go to. Like you said, that young girls have been growing up with abortion just being normal and normalized, and adoption is just kind of floating out there kind of in space that, oh yeah, there's this other thing. I don't fully know what it is. So I think definitely awareness about adoption isn't as prevalent as abortion for sure. I think that our culture is such a me culture. It's so selfish, and when a woman's pregnant, her body's going through all these different changes. I mean, I'm pregnant, and just today I was like, oh, I'm having trouble buttoning my pants. And so your body's going through all these different changes. And I mean, obviously, birth is a huge event, and then the recovery from birth. So I think that the woman possibly thinks through all the things that she has to go through, and then she doesn't even get to raise the child, but she's not thinking about the child and how, I mean, we're both adopted, and how much of a beautiful life that the child can have being raised by a different family. So I think those are probably the top two reasons in my mind that, yeah, adoption just isn't as prevalent as we would love to see it be.
You know, it's interesting because that woman who is thinking, well, abortion is my only choice right now. It's easy. I can, you know, put it on a credit card. I don't have to worry about the 9 months. I don't have to worry about raising a child. I can still go to school. I can still finish whatever it was I was supposed to finish, and, you know, have my dream career. What I want women to know is, like, 9 months, as you get older especially, 9 months is a pretty short period of time in life, right? And we're not here to, like, pressure anyone into a decision, but, like, there are a lot of famous people who were adopted.
Yes.
And Steve Jobs is one, right? And I think, you know, people watching this, you might be watching on your iPhone or your Mac, like, you wouldn't have that if Steve Jobs' mom didn't find a couple to adopt her baby, right?
That's so true.
Think about our world without that baby that you're carrying, right? That baby might just be the next president of the United States. It might be the next famous pop star. The baby might be someone who finds the cure to cancer, right? A baby might grow up to be an amazing teacher, might be an amazing mom or dad. They don't have to be famous to be worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
Thank goodness our parents,
Exactly.
raised us to be who we are. We're not famous, but, we still are playing an important part in society and making a difference in the world with our friends and our families. But we do hear time and time again, because we work in this space, like Emily said, and we hear that women would just rather not lose control. I hear that a lot. How do you feel about that, being a young woman who is pregnant? Like, what does that mean to lose control by choosing adoption?
Control is a huge aspect of life. And I think, especially if someone's not a believer, it's easy to think that they're in control of life. And so if they feel like they're in control of their own body, and of course the whole narrative of, like, my body, my choice, and then thinking that, yeah, if I'm in control, then it's my body, I get to control it. But they don't realize that what's growing inside of them is not their body. It's a whole nother soul. And yeah, it's just so different. And so I think, yeah, just being in control is just that narrative of trying to feel like you have it all together. And then you realize you're pregnant. And I feel like all these different scenarios can flash in a woman's face of, if I go this way or this way, that way. And I feel like when you're panicking, you often don't think of the path that's not talked about as much. So you're probably thinking about parenting because that's what your parents did with you, or abortion because that's what's been shouted from media everywhere. And yeah, adoption just kind of is forgotten about.
Right. And it's interesting because that woman who finds herself in an unplanned pregnancy, and she's thinking about the control aspects. I think one thing that we could encourage those young women, and I met a woman once when I was volunteering in California. She was in her 30s and she was a lawyer, and she found herself in an unplanned pregnancy, and she could easily afford to raise a child by herself. She just felt like, I'm not going to give up my career. I'm not going to pause. And after she went to the local pregnancy clinic and learned more about options, she ended up coming to our banquet, and she shared that she was choosing life and she was marrying the father of the baby. They worked out whatever issues they had, and she realized what a blessing it was and how that was taking back control of her life.
That's
but in terms of adoption, that mom can really take control in the most beautiful way, because she gets to choose the parents who will raise her child. She gets to even, you can choose the city if you want the baby to be close to you and watch her grow up or him grow up, you can pick someone close by. If you'd rather not be that involved, you can pick someone across the country, right? There's a lot of control you have. And there are so many resources. And that's where, again, with the church, I think we have this opportunity. There's so many programs for women,
yes,
but they really are geared towards married women who kind of have the perfect life, right? In a way, even like sometimes at church, like women's studies are in the morning,
right,
or MOPS or whatever. What about women who work or single moms? Like, where are the programs for her? How can she get tapped into the church?
Yes.
And I think too, like you mentioned, we have that confidence in Christ as Christian women, but a lot of women who are facing an unplanned pregnancy, they might not know Jesus, or they might have walked away from their faith. But what we can do as friends of these young women and just people in her community, let's point her to all the beautiful places in the Bible where God says, you're strong enough, you're brave enough, you can do this. Let's point her back to these beautiful adoption stories like Moses. I love Moses.
Yes.
Like, look at his life.
Yep.
He should have been murdered, right, with all of the other boys. And he instead was put in that little basket and pushed down the river and adopted into royalty. And Jesus, of course, his life was spared, and, you could say he was adopted by his father, Joseph, right? Yeah, right. It wasn't his earthly father. I mean, he was his earthly father, but not his biological father. But I think as believers, too, rather than forcing a woman to make a choice and saying, well, why don't you just choose adoption? Or why, like the language, too, right? We hear this time and time again, well, you can't give up your baby.
Right.
Well, when you say that to a woman who's already vulnerable and she's afraid and she's feeling probably guilty and ashamed, those words are not what she needs to hear. You really need to love her unconditionally. Yes. And I was going to say, too, we know that also that many women who find themselves in unplanned pregnancies, they may have had an abortion in their past before. So again, we'll put in our comments below some beautiful healing resources that you can go and get the help you need, if you have had an abortion in your past. But Emily, we work with a beautiful young mom at Storks. Her name is Jessica, and we will share her video here, but share a little bit about what you know about Jessica's story, because again, you being adopted and Jessica and you being kind of about the same age, like share a little bit about her story before we roll the video.
Yeah, definitely. I love hearing Jessica's story. Every single time she tells it, I always love to hear it. And just her bravery of choosing adoption. She was in college. She found herself in an unplanned pregnancy, and she talks about how her mom came to her and was just counseling her and said, oh, what about adoption? And Jessica was like, oh, I don't think I ever really thought about that. So she continued looking into that and realized that was the right choice for her. And like you said, with adoption, you do have so much control as a birth mom. I think certain narratives like to tell you otherwise, but there's so much control. She had a beautiful daughter, and the daughter was adopted by a loving family, and I think they live fairly close to each other, so they have an open adoption, which we've talked about a little bit in previous episodes, and Jessica's able to see her daughter off and on and just continue to grow that relationship between them. But yeah, we'll let you watch her story as well.
Yes, it's so inspiring, and we hope that Jessica as a birth mom will inspire you if you're facing an unplanned pregnancy and you're not sure what to do. And again, if you might have a daughter or granddaughter or someone in your neighborhood, even someone at the grocery store you see and they're pregnant and they're not sure what to do, be encouraged by Jessica's story.
What I love so much about Save the Storks is we get to serve those women. The women that are considering an abortion, that mom that may be struggling to parent, we're going to come alongside of her and provide those services to her. And I was one of those women. I was your typical college student, just kind of living the college life, newfound freedom, just having a good time. And I found myself pregnant. And I didn't know what to do. And, I grew up in a Christian household, and I couldn't tell you that I knew what being pro-life meant. I never heard that word. I never heard the word abortion. So I was kind of in the situation where I know that there's options. I don't know what they are, but I know that abortion is an option. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I couldn't go through with abortion. But what other options were there? So I called a clinic in Kansas, and that I would have to travel. There was cost involved. I would have to tell my parents, oh, I'm gonna go spend the night at my friend's house to go have this abortion. So I try to keep it from him. I confided in a friend, and my friend called my mom and told my mom that I was pregnant. And so came home, my mom was on the couch. She said, Jessica, do you have something to tell me? No. not at all. Nope. She said, are you pregnant? And that's just when I lost it. Yes, I am. Finally, this kind of pressure came off my shoulders. And so I talked to her about, what I wanted to do. And she brought up the word adoption. And immediately, I didn't know what adoption was, but immediately when I heard that word, I got angry. I thought, how can you think that I can place my child with another family? I won't get to be there for the first. I won't get to know who my child is. They won't see me as mom. And it was a couple of days where, I thought about adoption and what does that look like? What does that mean for me? And it's not what that meant for me. It was what that meant for my daughter. The choice that I made, that wasn't for me. It was solely for my daughter. So we went through the adoption process, and I didn't know what adoption meant, and I didn't know that I had choices. I didn't know that I could choose the adoptive couple. I could be very selective, how they were to raise her, what belief that they, had as Christians. I could be very selective in finding the adoptive couple. And I will tell you, from the moment I found out that I was pregnant, God was there. He had this whole thing planned out, and I didn't know it. I have to take a step back. Thank God. You were so good. In a time when I was not good to you, you were so good to me, and you were so faithful to your word. I love working at Save the Storks because I was that mom, and we're so intentional about bringing organizations like what you're doing along into the fold of what we're doing and working together. That way we can reach those women in the community. I wish more people knew what adoption was. I just wish more people, I think when they hear the word adoption, I think they refer back to 1960, 1970, and say, she has to, go to a maternity home for the next 9 months, and then she'll have the baby, and then she'll come back, like nothing ever happened. But adoption is not that. I think immediately when a woman is kind of in that pivotal moment where she finds out she's pregnant, it's either parenting, which is amazing, it's great. It's not for everybody. There's abortion, but there's also adoption. And adoption just doesn't get talked about a whole lot. So I want to be that voice for adoption. I want more women to know that, parenting support, there's, after abortion recovery, support, there's also support for birth mothers. Birth mothers need support as well. They need community, they need healing.
We know that there's 2 million couples looking to adopt a baby in this country. I was one of those couples or one of those people at one point in my life. And there aren't really many babies in our country because of really what's going on with abortion and abortion being so prevalent. We're not saying that to put guilt on any women who are pregnant right now, but just know that there are literally 2 million couples waiting to adopt your baby, and you will have full control of the situation, and they would be honored to have an open relationship with you, and you can be part of that child's life. Even if you're not physically raising your child, you will give them that gift of life and be the birth mom that I was blessed to get to know as I got older. And like Emily said, you'll be that hero in a child's life and also in the adoptive parent's life. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments and we will get back to you. Or check out SaveTheStorks.org and learn more about our organization. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us. God bless you.